Hello again. Before we dive into Visual Studio, I wanted to cover some basic vocabulary, and most of these words are actually we're going to cover further in depth later on in the class, but I wanted to at least introduce you to them so that when I actually say type or variable or function during the demos, just in the next few classes, you would not be completely lost. So I'd like you to copy this list down as I define each term, and have that at hand in class so that you don't get confused. So I'm going to begin. I'm going to keep these definitions fairly simple in my own words. So hopefully it'll start to make more sense as the class progresses. So the first word we're going to learn is type. And what this really is the interpretation that we give to binary data. Okay. Now, if you remember, binary is zeros and ones, and that's all the computer knows. And turns out that we use zeros and ones to represent any kind of data that the computer can use. We use zeros and ones to represent numbers, use zeros and ones to represent letters, and of course any combination of that, any sort of data, anything that you can imagine that we would process in a computer is all zeros and ones. So how does the computer know if this sequence of bits represents a number, a letter, or what? By its type. Okay? Let me give you a really simple example in our world. This word, it has 4 letters. Now, how many of you think that this word is pronounced lead, and it means a certain kind of metal? Okay? Now, how many of you thought this word is pronounced lead, and it means to guide a group of people in a certain task, as in, leading somebody, in the way that they should go? See, this is data, and its interpretation depends on what type it is. So if it's a noun, it's probably we're referring to the metal. If it's a verb, probably referring to leading someone in a certain way. So similarly with these numbers, they need to be given context, and the type gives them that context. Okay, moving on. Literal. Literal is raw data in your program. And probably from here on out, it'll always be implied. This stuff has to do with things in your program. That does not have a name. Okay? So for example, you could actually have in your code, you can literally type the number 4, and that would be a literal. Or you can type, in double quotes, you would put a string, like hello. Okay. They don't have names, well, I won't get there yet, but they are exactly what you see them to be. A number or a string. Okay, those are literals. A constant is data that has a name but whose value never changes. Okay? So we can say something like, can actually declare a variable called 4, or constant, and say 4 equals the number 4. Okay? Now, every time in my program, when I use the word 4, Visual Studio will know that I really mean the number 4. Okay? A variable is data that has a name and can change in your program as your program runs. So remember in the example, in an example I gave in class, we had a number of rolls counter. Say num rolls. Like how many times we rolled dice. And we started out with it being 3. And then sometime in our code we in the flowchart, I had said that we decrement the number of rolls by 1. So the computer will know that, so we have stored the number 3 in this, the data 3, in this variable that we have called numRolls, and we can then change that data. And the program knows, oh, numRolls, oh, it was a 3, we subtract 1 so we get a 2, now I'll stick that back into this variable. Okay? So it's data that has a name and can change.